Hi, I'm Marian. Welcome to Thrive Gluten Free, where I'm all about showing you how easy it is to cook simple and delicious gluten-free meals. Today I'm going to show you how to make a sweet potato crusted quiche. This is a must-try for many reasons. First of all, if you're living grain-free, you need to have some sort of substitute for your favorite foods. But also, sweet potatoes are incredibly rich in B vitamins and then vitamin C and A. And this is really important for those of us who are gluten-free because we have a difficult time getting B vitamins as gluten-free foods are not fortified, and we also are not consuming large amounts of wheat. So first, to make this crust, we are going to peel our sweet potatoes. These are actually garnet yams. I like the flavor better, but sweet potatoes work as well. We're just going to quickly peel them. And after you've peeled them, you're going to cut off the ends to make them easier to slice. And for this portion, we are going to use a mandolin slicer. You can use your hands and a knife, but a mandolin slicer makes the slices consistent, which is easier when it comes to making a recipe. So now we have sliced our sweet potatoes or yams to be on the thinnest setting that we can get on our mandolin, and we are going to line them in our pie dish. But first we need to lightly coat it with olive oil. I'm going to use my misto just because I like it and it's easier. Just lightly coat the pan, and then we are going to line it from the outside in, and then we'll do the edges. When making the crust, you want to make sure that there's a lot of overlap. As it cooks in the oven, it's going to shrink significantly, and if you do not overlap them enough, then you're going to get gaps. That's not a problem per se, but it does look a lot nicer when it's served if it's a consistent crust. And we're just going to keep going around, layering it until we fill it in the middle. Now that we have filled in the middle, we're going to work on the edges. There's a couple of different ways you can do it. You can just stick them in there, but if you're a stickler for things being really pretty, you can cut them in half if you have big enough slices left over. Again, you want to make sure that there is plenty of overlap so that there are not huge gaps in your crust. Now that we have filled in the crust, we are going to lightly coat the other side with olive oil and a little salt. And you can do this with a shaker. I prefer to do it by hand to just make sure it's a little bit more consistent. And you're going to want to use about 1/4 to 1/2 of a teaspoon. And now we are going to bake it in the oven on 325 for about 15 to 20 minutes. As the heat of each oven varies a little bit, you want to have a little bit of wiggle room, but check on it after 15 minutes and see how soft the potatoes are. Now that the crust is in the oven, we are going to work on the filling for the quiche. We are going to do a onion, mushroom, spinach with goat cheese. I am lactose intolerant, so I like to use goat cheese as a substitute for things that include dairy. I decided to use a cheese instead of the milk because it's extremely creamy, it has less of a bite, and I like the consistency that it gives the quiche. First, we are going to use 1/2 of a yellow onion. So we're just going to chop it in half as it goes flying, and just give it a fine chop. And from there, we need to turn on the oven on a medium heat and let the skillet preheat. And while we're doing that, we will rough chop the mushrooms. This helps keep the pieces small so that as you're slicing and eating the quiche, it's not falling apart. And now that our skillet is warmed up, we are going to add about a tablespoon of olive oil. and let that warm up for a minute or two. You want to have it warm so that it starts to caramelize the onion and give it that sweet flavor that we enjoy so much from dishes at restaurants. Now that the olive oil is warmed up, we are going to add our onions first. That sizzle is my favorite. Just spread them around in the oil. Now that the onions are translucent and smelling amazing, we are going to add our mushrooms. Now, mushrooms have a tendency to absorb your cooking fat, and one of my workarounds is to cover them with a lid for a couple minutes to keep the moisture from evaporating, and then you don't have to add more oil, even though fats are good for you, especially olive oil, so don't be afraid of them, but you also don't want it to be greasy. Before we cover them, we are going to add a little bit of sea salt. And just like fat, don't be afraid of salt. It is good for you, and too little is just as bad as too much, but it also gives your food flavor, and you really want your food to taste good. So we're going to cover those up for about 2 minutes before we take the lid off and start stirring them around and letting them glaze a little bit in the olive oil. Now that the mushrooms have been softened up and the moisture stayed in there, we're going to start sauteing them in our fat and letting that moisture start to evaporate. And while we're doing that, we're going to go ahead and rough chop our spinach. You can use as much or as little as you like. I like mine a little bit more green, but when I make them for other people, I tend to use less because not as many people are as into green foods as I am. Literally, you just make them in a pile, and run your knife through it. The mushrooms are perfect. They're nice and soft without being mushy, so I'm going to add the spinach. Now that the vegetables are cooked up and the spinach is wilting, we are going to work on the egg and cheese mixture. You are going to take 6 large eggs and then 4 ounces of herbed goat cheese. Bring my trash bowl over here. And add a little more salt to the eggs. And whisk them up. And now we're going to add the cheese. Mash that up and start to whisk it in. You want to try to get the chunks as small as possible, but it's okay if there's pieces in there. It adds to the flavor very nicely. And next up, we're going to stir in the vegetables. Smells so good. And just fold them in gently. The crust has been in for about 15 minutes. We're going to go ahead and take it out and put the filling inside. And as you can see that the potatoes have shrunk up a little bit, and there's a couple of gaps, but that is okay. Don't worry about it. It's going to turn out delicious no matter what. And now that the filling is inside, we are going to put it back in the oven for about 20 to 25 minutes and let it cook. It smells and looks amazing. I'm so excited. And the best way to serve the quiche is to take it out of the oven, let it sit for about 10 minutes before serving, just so that it can cool off and it's not going to burn their mouths. And what you're going to do is you're just going to take a regular knife and just cut it kind of like a pizza. and it's ready to serve. Thank you so much for watching today. I hope that you make this recipe, try it, and leave a comment below. Let me know your thoughts, what changes you made. I love to hear about them. If you like this recipe and want more recipes, you can head over to my website, roadtolivinghole.com. Follow me on Facebook, facebook.com/roadtolivinghole, and you can subscribe to my newsletter and get a recipe and other health-related information delivered to your inbox once a week. Thanks again and have a great day.